I'd like to welcome everyone. My name is İdil Gazi Ulusoy. I am Associate Professor of Sustainable Design in Aalto and leader of Nodus Sustainable Design Research Group, the research group that has been holding Nodus talks in this space, minus COVID lockdown times, in this space for almost 7 years. So we do bring together academics and practitioners around conversations that deal with sustainability and design. So if you're here for the first time, I would love to see your hands. Great, that's wonderful. It's always, depending on the topic, we always have first-timers and very regularly participating people. So welcome. Before I continue, little housekeeping. So after these talks, we need to leave this room before 6. But if you would like to mingle a little bit with us and also our speakers, we have a little bit of time next door. What is it? Is it the Badger? It's just right there at the corner. So you can join us for a drink or two. And we have 2 fantastic speakers today, but I'm going to leave introducing them to the curator of the day. Yes, Scott?
Yeah, just one thing, because today is a special night, so we actually open until 10.
Oh.
So we have free entrance from 5 to 10. So after the lecture, and you'd like to come here again and try to join the event. We have music upstairs and a special guests.
What time does it start?
At 5.
Ah, right. Okay. There you go. Maybe we are having our mingling drinks here. Great. Thank you, Pia. So I also would like to welcome our online participants. Yes, I'm going to introduce our wonderful curator, who is going to introduce our wonderful speakers, and also who is going to moderate the Q&A afterwards. So Guy Julier, full professor of design leadership in Aalto University, and I'm very lucky to have Guy as a colleague and a friend.
Oh, thank you.
Guy is a globally known researcher and a curator, and he has published multiple books, and he is pioneering an emerging subdiscipline in design cultures. So thank you so much, Guy, for joining us as the curator and curating this talk on the diverse city. I am now leaving the floor to you to introduce our speakers.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to İdil, and thank you to all of you for coming out on this dark night to be with us, and thank you to all of you at home listening in. So our topic for discussion is, as you know, the diverse city, and if any of you have been following the letters pages of Helsingin Sanomat, I do with the help of a magnifying glass and Google Translate, will have noticed several letters in the last 6 months kind of questioning the direction perhaps in which Helsinki might be going in terms of its buildings policy, its urban infrastructure, its urban planning systems. And some of you might have picked up a recently formed group called Kaikkien Kaupunki, City for All, which is meant to be representing citizens' desires or interests in reclaiming what Lefebvre called the right to the city, asking the question of whose city is it? And then another point of reference might be indeed the pamphlet which came out about 3 or 4 years ago during the pandemic, Kenen Kaupunki, Whose City, produced by a bunch of architects asking questions around the way in which built heritage is being dealt with. And that, in a sense, was a reissue of a pamphlet produced in the 1970s with the same topic. So the question of what the city is not necessarily new. In fact, what the question of what a city is perhaps as old as cities are. What a city is for, what versions of value does the city have? And it's quite often that the questions of social and economic value are either in conflict or get tangled up with one another. If any of you followed the work in creative industries development in the 1990s and early 2000s as pushed by Richard Florida and Charles Landry, we heard this idea that the vibrant city with buzz and diversity was also a creative city, and the creative city was also an economically successful city. In fact, if you looked around, there was hardly a city in the world in the early 2000s which wasn't marketing itself as creative, vibrant, a city with buzz, cosmopolitan, pluralistic, and indeed diverse. So the question of diversity of the city exists, I think, in many different levels. Cities are huge places and complex metabolisms. And to help us focus the conversation, we've got two great speakers with us today, two, let's call them movers and shakers in cities discourse. Movers because they push the debate on, and shakers because they shake the debate up. We have Hossam Hudi, who's head of the architecture major in architecture at Aalto University, who's an urban planner and has decades of experience of working with and challenging orthodoxies in urban planning. Our second speaker is Katja Lindros, who's the co-founder of Urban Practice, and also the Nordic City Making Week and the People-Driven Cities Conference, among other things as well. And we're going to hear a bit more about her activities later on. But to help us then get the conversation going and give us some points of reference, I'm first going to hand over to Hossam. So please.
Thank you for having me today. In a very humble way, I don't promise to give a very consistent or coherent speech. I will give you some flesh to think about things. And normally, architects show pictures. I don't promise that I will show any picture today. So I will give some narrative about things. Talking about me first, because also maybe you would like to know about me. I was an architect for a good time, specialized in hotel design and housing design in Egypt. I came from Cairo, very huge metropolitan. I will tell you a story soon about it. And in 1992, I practiced architecture from 1987. In 1992, there was an earthquake, a heavy one, hit Cairo. And the local governing body asked the architects and the civil engineers to go to inspect buildings and whether they can renovate them or pull down them, evacuate them, just name it. And city. The third and last story before going to this. During my research, I did a lot of interviews with public servants, with politicians, parliament members, mayors, just name it. And most of the time, look at me. I am an immigrant. When I go to interview a politician or a public servant, right away, they deal with me as if I am an activist. But I am not an activist. I have a neutral political agenda. I would like to know, because planning is the field of knowing. I would like to know how they decide and how they create foundation for the decisions. And I would say, because I have some nice, dear colleagues, co-authors to the Finnish ladies, I was all the time pulling them to go to the interviews. I don't like to go alone to the interview, as if a small kid is going to, and afraid from going to school, for example. This is the setting. This is about me. So, going to what I have done, is it maybe from
Just
here? Oh,
yeah.
Lovely. Okay. I didn't find a better way to structure my talk than having. This is the text that this event was announced by. And I highlighted some words in red font, and this will be the flesh of thinking together. We will talk about that. It's said that how urban planning homogenizes cities. We will talk about urban homogenization. And I will talk quickly about spontaneity and authenticity. I'll talk about resilience, social control, public space, interplay of power, very important, because we cannot understand what's happening away from this. And then stakeholders. So, urban homogenization. No doubt that there is a sort of like circuits of power by chain stores and banks, by retail oligopoly, by new liberalism in the service provision, because the public body would like to release all possible commitment, and private service providers nowadays are the one in charge. And maybe I can quote Saskia Sassen telling that cities became platforms for multinational operated and owned service providers. If you are standing on the streets under the bus shelter, this is a French company. Imagine that you are under a French company umbrella. This is a contract from 17 years ago. And they are the one responsible for putting the advertisement and taking care of this. This is a small example. So normally, when the city became a market for the new liberalism, I would say, normally you will find a marriage between commodification and homogenization. You cannot commodify the city without homogenizing it. You need, if you are selling a mug, you need to standardize the mug. And then you are producing in your assembly line, like thousands of pieces about it. Adding that, now talking about immigrants, there are two main schools in integration. There is the school of Chicago school, which is somehow considered the city as a homogenizer, that somehow reduce all the differences between the subgroups within the community. So city as a homogenizer is somehow try to put the immigrants to conform, to somehow to try to adapt, but not acknowledging their diversity, not having it as an asset, which is a different thing, and I doubt that it's here. So homogenization, spontaneity. It's happened that we are in Helsinki, not Helsinki only, Helsinki Espoonvanta, during the 50s and 60s, we have this kind of strip mall in Finnish called the Ostari. This is 1 to 2 floors, small retail premises for small and medium businesses. And there were about 40 of them functioning in a very good way, swiftly to their neighborhoods. But what happened again that in the 90s, there was this kind of failure of the GDP, and there was this unemployment era called lama in Finnish. And during this, a lot of self-employed mainstream independent retail closed down. And hardly nowadays we see any Finnish retailers rather than a flower kiosk, for example, but nothing else. And everything became under a chain. And you have big chains, and they are having banks. They have funding institutes, so they carry good margin of risk. So this is also to know that these are the competitors. But with the arrivals of immigrants, also at the end of the 90s, many of them invade this market and make a recovery and put many vacant retail premises back into life. And this happened in Pohus Ostari, shopping strip mall, in Kuntula, also in the two sides of Malmi, divided by the train, Ala Malmi and Ylä Malmi. You will find a lot of this in these two sides. These places I went to study. I studied them, and I spent maybe 4 years in the street and in these places. And I found the spontaneity in Jacob's spontaneity, which is somehow basically meant about that spaces, cities, and I would say on a metaphoric level, and systems, they have this kind of capacity for any evolution of emergent configuration. And one of them was the returning back, this small independent retail that are very spontaneous. Why they are spontaneous? Actually, this is part of the commodification of the culture, because they need to extend to you this kind of authentic feeling. Spontaneity, improvisation, and authenticity are main characteristics empowering the emergence of ethnic retail in Helsinki. Spontaneity is also reflected in the uniqueness of goods they're displaying and the layout of the retail premises by using objects brought to diaspora, not only showing the immigrant feeling of belonging, but also creating distinctive places. So this is a very unique restaurant. You hardly know that this is a restaurant, but this is a restaurant in Malmi. Every single item, even the silver tool, the plates, everything coming. And this is somehow also, it's very, I would say, smart. It's a Mediterranean cuisine customized to be veggie friendly. So they know that there is a segment, this crack in the market, that there are some people would like to have vegetarian food, but the flavor here is the customized Mediterranean cuisine. Talking about authenticity, authenticity has three dimensions. One of them, if you are visiting a museum and you see a Chinese clay pot of 5,000 years, you are reading about the clay pot, and this is actually, it is authentic. It is mostly about the object, but this is a passive relation. You receive the information and that's it. So it is authentic because of uniqueness. It's only one Chinese clay pot of 5,000 years. That's it. But then the constructive authenticity, it is a bit more about reasons of authenticity, why these things are authentic. But the highest of them is the existential authenticity. We are not anymore visiting Paris to have an image with Tour Eiffel or to visit Moulin Rouge. We would like to live like French. We would like to be part of the lived experience. This is actually the most important factor in authenticity related to being part of a setting. So, and I met, by the way, not many, but also it's a considerable clientele. I meet many Finns, white Finns, who are visiting these places. By the way, this restaurant, the one that I showed earlier, was fully visited by hipsters, no immigrants. So going further now, resilience. As I told, this kind of niche market, it is based on being specialized in something because it's based on authenticity. You are giving a good or an item or a service that no one can compete with you. You are unique in this. So the so-called niche marketing proposes the development of new forms of specialization structured by cultural fragmentation and differentiation that split clientele into smaller segments, thus resulting in more heterogeneous development that resists homogenization. This is actually the other part of it. It's not like commodification, homogenization. This is somehow, because it's authentic, it's unique, it's one of its kind, and it is giving this kind of cracked segment for certain clientele, then it can easily resist homogenization. So ethnic eateries can be situated in such a niche. Thus, there is a role played by neighborhoods that specializes in ethnic food. And this is actually, as you see, it's an old reference. So this was, I would say, 25 years ago in Canada and the States and in the UK. You can still have this kind of a potential of a neighborhood that specializes in something that can carry on with this social sustainability and play a role in regeneration and raise the area vitality. Social control. So planning is a sort of power. planning has the authority and has the monopoly on the land use, and planning decide what to do in a current empty land or what to do on already existing building. Shall we demolish it? Will we renovate it? Shall we build this area? What kind of function? So the planning serves as a device of social control, regulating the production of public space, thus facilitating elite domination in urban planning and their control of societal resources such as space, identity, power, and wealth. But this is very important. To do this without being blamed, without being accused of using power, you need to do it in a systematic and embedded in instrumental way in the system. And this is the question of power, how we need to break down this, analyzing the power embedded in the system. This will come later. Such control is systematically operationalized through non-decision making. And non-decision making itself, it is a decision, but it is a decision to ignore. So you ignore something, and this is powerful decision by the non-decision making, which can be clarified as organization, the mobilization of bias, how to make bias systematically happening without being accused of that. Public space. So the lived spaces, be them street, piazzas in medieval cities, in new cities, in a shopping mall, all of them, spaces are not merely passive medium in which the social life unfolds, but rather represent an essential element of social life through which the user spontaneously turn their presence and lived experience into meanings. Let's take it like this. The space in its abstract form is a space without users. But when we come in as users and we start to socialize, we are making the meaning and we are making the place making. We convert the space, the physical setting, into a place, which is the locus of meanings, space as a locus of meaning. Cultural visibility is a means of placemaking, which can be divided into two interrelated aspects: the physical setting, which is the space, and the people activities making the place and making and making meanings. In places where diversity is visible, the creation of a higher sense of inclusion is enabled, especially for those who are visibly different and might stand out in spaces which are less diverse. A Nigerian lady dressing her national costume, she cannot linger rather than what she would like to do when she is buying from Kampi. But this same lady will linger, will stand, will socialize at Puhos and Kuntula. And this is what's here about. This diversity is somehow acknowledged and warmly welcomed. This happened in placemaking. I told I will not show pictures about architecture, but this is only a simple thing. So buildings, spaces inside them, and people activities, all of them making the placemaking, and the meanings. And meanings might be belonging, attachment, just name it. Places where you consider third place and you can somehow linger. And not, by the way, it's not a must to be for consumption. You can spend whatever you like, how long you would like to stay without consumption. It's not conditional to consume. Stakeholders. Immigrants' neighborhoods are frequently problematized. And actually, this is, I would say, if I'm blaming the practice, I would also blame us researchers. In academia, there is a huge literature body taking these neighborhoods as talking about segregation, marginalization, and structural inequalities. We rarely talk about them as a social capital, as an asset. We rarely talk about it. You can find a whole body talking about housing, affordability, segregation, just name it, and a lot of funding about it also. And this is somehow, I would say that it's making the dilemma deeper, that the funder is more secure to fund projects talking about this as a problem but not as a potential. A few studies have demonstrated the significance of immigrant contribution to regeneration of neighborhoods. Muller highlighted the possible role of neighborhood in founding initiatives as a reaction to condition of social exclusion. Yes, this is exactly the same case of Helsinki. Among the immigrants, 3 ethnicities only, they have unemployment rate of 65%, imagine. And these people, they are mostly the people developing this self-employment. It is their way to show the exclusion. It is their way to show that we are capable. We not only run the business and we can hire people and we can even pay taxation. So this is very important to consider that this is, I would say, a counter-defense mechanism to the exclusion, what's happening here. And of course, Muller urged the enhancing of trust between local governing and the community in urban regeneration process. So, mind me now start to be dry, because this is somehow, I would say, this is the part that exposes what's happening, why it's happening, and how it happened. The unbalanced interplay of power between diverging stakeholders is steered by policy instruments that act as a form of power and legitimize the policy outcomes. Luke just suggested the 3 dimensions of power: power through decision-making, power through agenda setting, and power through domination. I will talk shortly about them. Power through decision-making. This is the most exposed. We can observe it because actually this happened in open discussion in a parliament, in a committee, urban planning committee for a municipality, just name it. So it's about that that there is a decision taking place and there are actors. You can see this. It's not hidden. And let's also have this kind of agreement that power, in a very simple definition, it is one actor affect another in a significant manner, which is somehow creating superiority. Some people are more important than others. Or people here would, let's talk about groups, or not groups, let's talk about topics. So power through agenda setting. In the dimension of power through agenda setting, the power is exercised by influencing, restricting, and restricting the topic permits to be discussed in political debates. It is putting you the minutes of meeting, the agenda. What will be our priority? What will be important to be discussed politically? And here, you need to consider that there are some other points outside the agenda. They are the one ignored. They are the one that we will not discuss. Thus limiting what could be considered important for political consideration, shaping political and social values, and defining the operational actions by institutional practices. In doing so, it creates the foundations of evidence for powerful groups / stakeholders to threaten some topics by participating power through non-decision making. The one not on the agenda are the one that we will ignore and are the one under the non-decision making dimension of power. And finally, this is the radical view of this, because actually the system would like all the actors to be convinced that what's happening is logical. It's about shaping your own perception to think, your understanding, your own convincing. It is shaping their main actors' perceptions, conceptions, and preferences in such a way that they accept their role in the existing order of things. For this reason, Locke called it the radical view. Simply, this dimension of power allows both political system and its procedural policy to preserve the power of the ruling class. So we are here in somehow, I would say, I like metaphors. Do you know the SWAT team? SWAT team, okay, special forces. What they will do when they invade some places, they make the smoke bomb first. And the smoke bomb is the thing that is moralized. Let's say that we have a very strong master plan talking about extending Kantakaupunki, the inner city, outward on the trunk and making some urban hubs around the trunk. Right. And this is very good. And we will make this pedestrian friendly. And we will reduce the car traffic. What else? The third thing, but we need to make the anti-segregation policy. These segregation policies that would deal with all the places that we are talking about to re-engineer the demography profile. So the big thing, the smoke bomb, is the public good of social mix. Who can oppose it? Because this is a public good. You cannot oppose it. You're saying that this is fine, let's do this. So the blind spot of anti-segregation. The social mix planning is not poverty elevation. Rather, such a policy is a part of a wider new liberal urban growth strategy. The social mix planning is in fact gentrification covering a hidden social cleansing agenda. By issuing a moralistic discourse, the moralistic discourse here is that we are helping poor. You cannot oppose this because the idea is very moralistic, right? What to add to this? That Helsinki Sanomat was publishing that Myllypuro is recovering after the demolishing of the Ostari, of the shopping mall. Why Myllypuro is recovering? What happened in Myllypuro? They demolished the Ostari, they built new buildings, but these buildings attracted middle class and hired better taxpayers. And what happened after 7 years? That you find the average income per household is recovering. But this doesn't mean that all the deprived people living in Myllypuro before the gentrification, they became richer, right? It's only about that you added 1,500 new households making better wages. But you withdraw the place from them and you build on the top of it. So there is a mask here. So this moralistic discourse, introducing it as a support for the public good, thus any potential criticism on gentrification is avoided. Who would oppose social mix? This is the bomb. This is the smoke. Helping the poor. Frequently, such policies are promoted by both planners and politicians. I met a lot of them telling that this is public good, blindly. That's it. Thank you. As strengthening of the social tissues of disadvantaged neighborhood. What will happen to the social tissues developed in Kontula and Pohjois after demolishing them? Nothing. Thank you for getting the right to the city. And the right to the city is this kind of two rights, right to participation, right to appropriation, and it's actually the contradictory between the use value and the exchange value. I can continue this in the panel discussion if the time is running. Sorry, thank you.
If you're going to have questions after Richie Holt and break turn into Katya now. A lot of what you're taking up, I'll just link in some way. A lot of really interesting things there about the tensions between the macro conception of the city and certainly the macro financial processes behind the city and the micro practices that make up the city.
Thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation, and to Hassan for again another fantastic presentation. I think we have a lot to talk about. So, and I have a chair here, which like maybe I'm trying to draw some sympathies, but actually I hit my foot yesterday. I'm needing a little bit sometimes to rest my weight, so I have an excuse. But indeed, my name is Katja Lindroos, and I am the founder and the producer at a company called Urban Practice. So as Guy told, we are creating self-initiated projects, which basically are for us the tool to look at very much about what the urban change is about, to experiment and to connect to different parties. We also work on commission, But today I will be only talk about this self-initiated project because I think they are the ones that are the most relevant in the sense of what the topic of the day is. My first headline for the talk was the frequently asked questions about city making, but then I was thinking that actually we don't get so many questions ever asked about this city making, so it's not that frequently asked questions. Actually, this point of view is not that much looked at. But anyway, what we want to use here as a let's say concept is plurality. And a very simply described according to the definition by anthropologist Fredrik Barth, with the idea of plurality where different parties keep their identity. So this is very far from the idea of assimilation. And we think that this is something that is a very useful concept to think about also when we talk about different stakeholders in the city. How do we enable plurality? So very shortly about our company, I will not go through all kinds of projects that we do, but these are things that we have indeed self-initiated. So in a nutshell, we call ourselves a connector. We connect things. That's our main role. We are indeed not urban planners. Neither are we some kind of indigenous activists. We really do this as a company. We work as entrepreneurs and we create models also of creating value and exchange. So we connect places and potential. So this is how we create actions. We use festivals and as platforms for connecting and experimenting. We do also our own research. So we explore different references. We travel. We look at initiatives that are very much about bottom up and top down, connecting to each other. This is something that is ongoing. So we look at very much at the especially European cities. My partner is Dutch. So that might explain a bit the angle here. From that, we want to bring also references here. Hossam very beautifully described the question, is Helsinki a city? Where is the city? So when we talk about diversity, it's essential that we get more references here, more touch points. So we create conferences, talks, indeed, such as what Guy mentioned, people-driven city, that we have created together with Helsinki University and also with Aalto University, and masterclasses. So when we bring people here who are really somehow, in our opinion, interesting people in the context here, we connect them to local actors and connect them to the things that are urgent on the ground. We communicate. So yes, we are also branding the question of the neighborhoods. We are creating new narratives and we are looking for voices that represent new angles. So this is we are using ourselves as a media producer, and we educate. We have the pleasure also to visit universities as lecturers, but also in other formats. And in a certain way, maybe the approach of education could be almost like edu action. So what we do is we connect programs, for example, from the university to something that we're exploring through LähiöFest very directly. The picture here below, they were looking at the concept of tori, so a square, a meeting place, which actually the findings we were directly using in the festival production. And here we have a masterclass in Myyrmäki in Vantaa with our international guest engaging with students, etc. Ellen van Loon from OMA lecturing about the complexity of the city. So that was the introduction. So to go to really to the topic of the day and how we have interpreted it. So are we using our city's true potential is the driving force, the question that we ask through our work. Are we creating more diversity, connection, and opportunity? In other words, the process of reimagining who and what our cities are for. Are we negotiating the space between difference and examining the potential of the unlikely connection? I will get back to the word unlikely connection. Are we nurturing curiosity, making the notion of disruption as elemental part of our toolbox? Disruption meaning something that interrupts a well-designed system. Are we creating to enable that disruption or to suppress that disruption? These are the questions that we explore through our own festival. So I will not go through my personal history, but I am from these places, from these Lähiös. So very briefly to say, Lähiö is a term for a quite our context. Let's say we are very, very local now here in this context. It's a 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s suburb. Not the type of suburb typically that you see in a American context. So this is not so much about sprawl. It's these little pockets, these little neighborhoods that typically have exactly the kind of ostari as a center point, what Hossam was talking about. And our interest has been in looking at Lähiös as something quintessential urban in the realm that we are here. These are our urbanity. This is what we built when we created the first real wave of urbanization. So this is not something that is separated, isolated from the idea of the city. This is the city. And in a certain way, it sounds naive, but talking with my partner said that, you just have to tell really how it was, because, how do we start with this? Because basically this was the thing. We approached different parties by saying, come on, let's do great things in the suburbs. This was the pitch, it didn't have, benefits and outcomes or something, but it was a energy and basically call out, like, let's share a love for these places and let's create some kind of a realm where we can meet and exchange and actually also do stuff. Just really totally just action-based. And this certain kind of urge that we had about connecting to different parties, specifically bringing them to the suburbs, brought us to this neighborhood. This is Mikkola in Vantaa, and we were looking for basically a place as a platform where we could create a festival as a meeting place. And we found this block that is behind the guys there that was going to be demolished by a social housing company, and they have built in the new social housing there. So this has not a drastically gentrifying story behind it. But anyway, a very progressive CEO said to us, yeah, go ahead, you can borrow it. So we took over that whole housing block and we made it into a festival. And the idea, of course, of this thing was that we didn't really know what we're going to do. So we approached large Finnish companies, listed in the stock market, municipalities, technology innovation funds, smaller companies, everybody. And so it's like, we will learn while we go. And as the guy's T-shirt say, there is a chance. So this is the, yeah, it's just great. Yeah. Life is always the best. So this was the starting point. And a little video, if it works, maybe to bring you to our house, so the first Lähiö Fest, if it now shows it or not. Can I see it? Does it go on? Does anybody know how to help me?
You exit the full screen and then you can find the link.
Okay. No, it's embedded in the, there it is, yeah. Good, yeah, thank you. Just to bring you a bit in to the place of the first Lähiö Fest. So we were indeed in this 70s. This was actually from the year that the most housing was built in Finland. And we created a team after we had got different partners to invest in this, basically this project and to be involved with it. We went there to Marcinkuja and we basically created in one summer, renovated apartments to become places for exploring through exhibitions and through events what these places actually can represent. And this happened to be in 2015, which you might remember as the refugee crisis year. So we had a very important topic was the notion of home. And because next door there was a school, which had actually a lot of children who had just recently come to Finland. So one of the projects was about the children were interviewing their parents what home means. We connected to media, so we had the biggest commercial TV channel, MTV3 was making showing a show every morning from that place. We had also live broadcasting, so the kids were quite enthusiastic. We had Tekes, nowadays Business Finland, who brought around 30 startups who for the first time saw actually Lähiös as their market. So we were presenting the things that looked at in different ways, both at the physicality of these places, of really the technical problems, how can we solve certain issues of sustainable, let's say, like how to do the renovations in a sustainable way, but also how to make them more safe and how to deal with the aging population, but then also very much about a certain feel, a certain aesthetic almost atmosphere. And because we were there really on the ground, what happened was that during that summer, kids from Mikkola just started to basically, swirl around us, and we couldn't really do anything useful otherwise than say, come and work with us. So we worked with the local kids during the summer and created a workshop space together with them that then hosted events, which was formerly a kioski, which they had liked very much. And this was a very odd atmosphere, of course, because we were engaging with all these kind of companies that put their brand on the line. And we were in a place that when we started there had just been some garbage and some cars being burned down. And we had a lot of questions about, okay, how are you going to, secure this thing, not necessarily so much from the partners, but from some people like, are you crazy? You don't know that it's going to be demolished and now you're just renovating and everybody's going to break everything immediately, right? We didn't have enough money to basically to create a constant security. But what happened during the summer, all the way till the last day of the festival, not one single window was broken. Not one single littering or anything was happening. We had there next door a place that hosted everyday people who have substance abuse problems, and they became basically our guards. We had a garden in the middle with Kekkilä putting huge investment, basically creating an edible garden. Nobody touched it. They actually planted some potatoes there. So like, I have some potatoes, why not? So what this certain kind of shared almost seal that we had around it, just because we were with our faces present and actually not creating any kind of barriers, created a feeling of like, yeah, we are there. And the next day when we left, we took our stuff, first windows were broken. So that's how it goes. So you have to just be present. So anyway, we decided that we have created now a festival, something that we can repeat, and indeed it grew. So from 2015, it was in one block. 2017, we were reaching out to the city of Helsinki, who was very interested in how we had done this. And we said, let's make it in 10 suburbs. So a festival that expands and multiplies the view of the city in one take. And then in 2019, it went to 4 cities. Sorry about how the text is showing there. And even during this time of growing this and creating basically constantly this action, this was the sentence we heard the most. And I'll enlighten you why this is not possible is there. But this was anyway possible. So these are now, I calculated that this is now a little bit under 100, so 100 parties, but there was more during the festival. So we created basically a platform which enabled multiple parties to engage with the topic of neighborhoods. There were parties, because I think many people are always interested, like how do we make our money with this kind of thing? So I will reveal it immediately. We have a model where bigger parties such as the city and the big corporations pay us. All other parties are either so-called content partners who bring their expertise or some kind of program, or they are actually parties that we just say like, please do something with this. So this is the model. We create basically a pot that enables us to set a certain production, and then we ask all the partners to work themselves to invest it through their work and through their resources. That's the model. So we believe that a festival can be a platform that can be built on and for plurality. And this can be done because the idea is that you create culture. Some people say you can't create culture. That's nonsense. We create culture every day. So we create culture when we create an idea that we can repeat. And we have learned this firsthand. So this is not a theoretical thought. When we have come back with Lähiöfest, some of the partners have come with us. they have started to anticipate before the festival, what are we going to do with next LahjaFest? They have started to direct their ideas, their budgets, their thinking. What are we going to do? How are we going to engage with this idea? And we think that this is a way how a festival can be more than a showcase of different ideas, but it actually can be a catalyst. Three lenses, Hossam had beautifully several, but we have now three lenses here that I will shortly explain what the key points and give you some concrete examples. The first lens has to do with initiatives. So basically, initiative taking has all to do with how to set a scene for plurality. First of all, we have to start with acknowledging the importance that there is a starting point. So that is an influence of what and the who and the how are involved. That's really, it is how it is. It's not for nothing that LahjaFest for us is a self-initiated project. We are not commissioned to do this. It doesn't start ever there. We are always looking and have to negotiate basically the connection with different parties. Setting the scene, defining the conditions for collaboration. And this has to do with extremely practical things, the legalities, making contracts, basically designing new types of contracts that enable different parties to be part of something, where questions of ownership and basically seclusion don't come in the way. We start always from the capabilities of different actors. So we don't approach parties and saying like, this is the outcome that you're going to help us to do, by saying, okay, let's go and do some great things in the suburbs. What can you do? What do you have? What can you bring to the table? And then a very difficult thing, resisting the urge to rush into solutions. Also, when you are on a tight schedule, like a festival, starting to question first and not looking for the answers, and being very aware that maybe the parties who are asking the questions are a limited group. So here is an example of what the role of the initiative taker can enable. So we created, in the context of LahjaFest, we created a pilot for how cities can be taught in schools. This was a program that took place in 2019 in 4 cities, and it contained basically different models where we are not creating the perfect curriculum about how to teach about cities, but we basically hooked all the experts that we had in our LahjaFest partner circle, from cities to street artists, to go and teach in schools. Created a model for basically for a workshop, and also created a possibility for these parties to allow children to come to learn in their premises. So there was learning about physics at the premise of a laboratory of an engineering company, but also Aalto University, etc., etc. Something like 350 plus pupils were part of this project, and there was no indeed specific funding made for it. There was no funding time. This was in the context of LahjaFest and in its partners. And I think one of the important things what we like very much to take as an example is the city of Riihimäki, who, maybe because it's a small city, was able to use this opportunity maybe the best. They had a school that was highly important in that suburb, which was going also to be torn down, and the children had, of course, a big basically change in their lives. They had to go to another place. There was some feelings of insecurity, even of fear of certain places. So they used our Kaupunkioppi workshop model to design together with the children the route. So this can be, and this was done incredibly fast. So there were no processes. Again, we just had the platform for experimenting, and then there was a momentum to do it. They also won the teachers, rightfully so, a prize of the city for this. Second lens is the economic model, which I already mentioned about. So the essential thing for us is enabling everybody to do more. We so-called don't want to suck our partners dry of their funds. We want to say, okay, you put this pot, but then you do yourself a lot more, which means that when we have calculated our festival budgets, the real value that has been going on, it's typically 4 or 5 times bigger what has been going around. And it definitely has not been the budget that we have been managing. We are very deliberate about creating connections. So when we reach out to different partners, we create rules, which are about, yeah, you have to interact and work together with somebody, some kind of institution you have never done it before. We enforce collaboration. We are looking for ways how the partners, also when they're corporations, and especially in the case of corporations, how they can engage in creating more value to the local community. So this is not indeed explained through just like, well, we do some marketing and we get maybe some return on investment with the added sales. They do something else. I think this is a very interesting thing. And for me as a Finn, sometimes I'm looking like, are we really totally okay with so-called the market and the fact that companies do exist? Because this is where we get most questions about. Doesn't that divert the whole agenda? Doesn't that do that? Doesn't that do that? Companies, in our experience, are the most open-minded in this engaging because they see their role very much in the context of the neighborhood as they provide work, they provide also learning for their staff. This is a place to experiment. And then, of course, the cumulative effect, which comes through in this project. So in the context of LähiöFest 2017, we created a concept for the city, how the city can engage with the citizens and with different parties, which was about creating these stories that I mentioned. So this kind of meeting places. And these stories, that were 4 of them during one weekend, enable multiple parties, multiple stakeholders to create program there. So this was only one project inside of one tori, but it tells about, in a way, a bit about what that connecting factor can do. So we indeed, again, didn't approach K-Market with the idea that you will start a pop-up restaurant during our festival. We had no idea, and they didn't have either. They just said, Lähiös are our thing. We are in Lähiös. They are important for us. Our entrepreneurs are there. We want to be part of this story. So during the festival process, we created the concept of a pop-up restaurant where students who are learning how to cook got teaching from expert chefs. They created a whole marketing campaign where they used the data that what people are buying in different neighborhoods. So there was a whole recipe book of 10 different neighborhoods. We connected it to media, we connected to circus artists and with all kinds of cultural actors, and created a place where people came. There was a marketing campaign that had nothing to do basically with us, that K-Market put out. They advertised it in Helsingin Sanomat, in the metro, etc., etc. So finally, around you can calculate yourself. It was €5 per dish, and people came in. So we raised more than 10,000 euros in one day, and this was given back to the youth with participatory budgeting. So we also followed up what was done with that money. So this was a way of engaging basically in an idea: can a festival, can basically a pop-up be a generator of local, like basically a local incubator? And then the last thing that is the lens that relates quite directly to what Hassan was talking about. So the question of ownership, somebody can use the word power. It starts with admitting, mostly to oneself, that not all that are active in the city have a say about the city. And for us, the important part has been all the time to incorporate everyone who creates an impact in the city. And this has to do with this model that I now showed you. Because we have this partnership model, we are enabled to put our feet on the ground and to go and meet and engage with anybody and say, come to our festival. We don't need to have a separate funder, and also these people, these entrepreneurs in the Puhos, in Kontula, and these places like this don't have to pay us anything. They can be part of our campaign. And in approaching these parties, what we have learned essential about the question of ownership is that we don't come there, hey, we have this beautiful good doing thing, you are going to so much, we are going to help you. We say, we are setting up something where you help us. You have something to offer us. Because that's the way how we can actually connect to people from their needs, their expertise and their motivations. So as an example of this, the HUTS Helsinki campaign. This was really a campaign, and this is maybe one of the initiatives that has had the longest bow, and it's still there, because this was all about creating basically a network. Very simply said, what the idea was, to create a campaign that would inspire people to engage with the neighborhoods, but mostly we wanted to put exactly those people who are actually not on the radar and are not seen, mainly entrepreneurs from migrant backgrounds, on the same map with the city. That was what we wanted to do. The model was simple. We created an Instagram campaign. We were first asked quite on street photographers to take really cool pictures. So we created attraction, and this is a beautiful exhibition as well of it. But then we started to ask that, okay, people can put their pictures and put some hashtag HUTS Helsinki, and they can win some prizes. And the prizes were for everybody's surprises, of course, because they didn't know what they could win, but they won prizes from these entrepreneurs. So you took a beautiful picture, you could win a haircut in Puhos, or you could win a dinner or something like that. And this was, or coupons to Alania Market, etc. So this was basically about using, again, our festival as a tool to create a way of creating more visibility of the difference and of the plurality of the city, which we continue starting in, of course, in Helsinki, and we continued it in Espoo, Kauniainen, and Riihimäki later on in 2019. This has had a huge impact also in our just every day. When we had, of course, Corona, this was the network that we were able to get the word out. For example, of that we need translations for guidelines, etc. This was it. This was the social infrastructure. And because we had a bit also about Helsinki, so we're very happy to say that during festival in 2017, when we were building up also HUTS, we talked with the marketing, basically professionals of the city of Helsinki, about how political are they really with the outlook that they create of the city, which was definitely at that time not that diverse. And the conclusion was that after the festival, we have created basically stories about the neighborhoods. So again, the HUTS are carried to the official marketing and branding of the city through that. So to conclude, some points of discussion with a familiar face there. In Nordic City Making Week in Puhos, we can talk about. Yeah. This is something that I would like to leave you in thinking about. So, not to create now, and just to be very clear, this is not about from this to this. This typical, what consultants like to do. This is now a thought that both of these exist, and it's all good that it exists. But it's a way of thinking and to understanding where we might have to go as the next step. So in a certain way, we are in Finland, in the cities that we are now, we are in a certain kind of best ideas culture. So we look at the city and we set up a road there where we basically bring in our ideas that are very much based on our shared history, language, culture, basically sameness. And the best idea emphasize very much like we have good values, we good things, Myllypuro, let's do this, this is a good thing. We have to think about the schools, we have to think about that. And the idea is also very design driven. I'm also working with design, and I see there is a certain, let's streamline, let's bring good things forward idea. This is, of course, absolutely necessary, because we can't actually do any planning without somehow aligning certain ideas. But when we talk about the plurality of the city, it is actually a pretty different approach. It is not the best ideas, but it's just more ideas. It is starting from the ideas that these connections and the value is already happening there. We are not putting a certain kind of ideal there. We have to actually engage in those connections and be involved in it. It is an idea of interconnectedness, it's interdependency, and it starts with the idea of differences. constant negotiation. We often talk about negotiation. People say, oh, no, not more negotiation. No, sorry, but it's not possible to say no more negotiation because we negotiate all the time. I'm negotiating now with you. So you can't just, it's what we are as social creatures. So here we are, the emphasis is more on the importance of the connection and enabling the dialogue, tolerance, and dealing with interruption. And seeing that actually when your process is interrupted, then it's inclusive and not the way that when it's working smoothly. So some learnings that don't show well, I'm sorry for, because our letter type is different than it shows here. So I will. So our cities are physical spaces, and this is something that we see as a fundamental. So our actions in these pages are the ones that connect us. What I mentioned about this contract making, something that we want also you to know and to acknowledge. We have learned the hard way that things are not always about rules and laws. They are also very much about culture and ownership structures. We have used our time and effort in creating totally legally viable contracts that anyway have taken 1.5 years to negotiate through. So it's not about that it doesn't fit. That's the impossibility. That's why it so-called doesn't work. It has to do with ownership. For example, with the city, we don't now own this project. So how can we engage with it? Because it has to be ours. There is no legal, no contractual problem there, but this is not how things are done. I can't read it either. They're in between, but this is a good idea. In a more plural society, an idea of trust lives more in the area of investment and less in the area of collective agreement. This is what we do with LahjaFest. We create basically a model to get invested in the city from different perspectives. And the last one, and not the least, collaboration is difficult. Just to be clear, if it were not, we would do it much more. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we're going to sit over here so that the people inside that laptop can see us. So if you want to come and join us, maybe. Good. Well, I've been sitting here taking pages and pages of notes, hoping that I'll be able to sum up this in some neat, 3-sentence, easy paragraph in some really kind of glib way. But I've failed. I'm unable to sum up such inspiration and complexity that you gave us. But I think the final thought, which occurred to me whilst listening to you, was the importance of spaces of deliberation, the importance of creating environments and events and meeting points to have exactly these kinds of discussions about what kind of city we want and what kind of city are we actually enacting or practicing. So I'm going to stop there and throw it open to you, folk, and invite questions and or comments. Okay, just one so far. Yes, do please. We've got a microphone roving around the room. Keep an eye on the time. I don't have to throw you out. It's 6:45 now, do I? You can stay all night.
Yeah.
If that's okay with you. Are we in business? Do we have sound? Yes. Yes, lovely.
Walked into this by accident. I just was studying music. I've been studying in San Francisco. If you follow the news, you perhaps know about the implosion of the city. Mass homelessness. All parts. The city can't really find a solution to this. And I often think what point will it come? You're thinking that all cities will survive, like yours or 50 actually voting seems alien to the theories that people today are talking about. They're thinking, what is it that made this happen, and why could it happen in Helsinki or in Finland? And that it all comes down to not just gentrification, but the idea of who was controlling these spaces. You know, and this is why they talk about private-public partnerships, always trying to keep a real tight control of something, not get small things out of it. In San Francisco, based on this idea of the gay community, the artistic community, failed because they can't eke out this space where everybody can meet. If money is decided. I noticed the sponsors of the festivals were Finnish companies, no multinationals. San Francisco, multinational corporation, they have no interest reserving these. My question is, you think actually it can die here too? What at the moment you do bloody good job. You can die as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So how close are we to a San Francisco meltdown?
Actually, I give you one example in San Francisco where they refer to Finland. It was the idea of no questions asked by homeless people. Take them off the street first, then see what you can do with them. Whereas in San Francisco, it's, oh, can you prove you're a good Christian or a good person? Then we might. That I think is a very good example.
Okay, thank you. Who's going to start?
Thank you very much for the question. I admit that I'm not too familiar with San Francisco as a city, of course, from a personal perspective, but I think I get the question there. First, a notion about indeed these companies. So you're absolutely right. You see, we see it quite a lot as one of the things that is an underutilized asset of Finnish culture, that we can quite easily find still a certain idea of building a society, regardless of what sector people are representing. And of course, there is all kinds of aspects and etc. But for us, it has been highly important that what we are doing, we start from a certain idea of reality. We don't slice the reality. Let's take this kind of plan and just to take the nice people on board. We want to start with the reality, who is there really as stakeholders, who are there dealing and embracing basically the possible conflict even of interest, etc., because that's what the city is about. About implosion, I can only talk about now the understanding of this city. I think a certain kind of, let's say, ignorance in understanding actually what a city is about is perhaps the greatest threat to our current condition. Because in a certain way, just like the society, the Nordic society has of course worked in a certain condition really well as a quite top-down driven endeavor, indeed based on the good ideas, etc., and we see that diversity in many forms is challenging that. And if we don't have tools, and if we don't even have thinking, not to mention even references, to understand the diversity and the complexity which a more, let's say, mature city is about, we will actually exclude and push out a lot of that creates urbanity at the moment. And what Hossam was saying is actually happening in a really, really tangible way, which is why we look at these hostels, because they are the places that indeed create a transformation, enable the activity of people who come to the city to indeed create value and exchange with it, basically creating a very local market. When the city puts a plan forward, we are going to one by one basically demolish, we are going to demolish an infrastructure that creates this. Where is it going to happen? Do we understand the importance of clustering? Do we understand the importance of basically social support systems? Or are we just saying like, well, you guys, you do it somewhere else? And that, I think that's the moment we are now witnessing. And why, in a certain way, even though we both maybe say that we are not really activists, you can't help but become an activist if you care about the city.
Hassan, do you want to? Well, thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. Maybe I would comparing to the planning system in the States and here, planning system in the state is built on this 9 mileage cadastral system, which is mostly about the ownership. And if we compare this to Helsinki, Helsinki owns over 75% of the land, and this is another margin of power, because the role played by planners in any planning process, be it renewal, gentrification, just name it. The planner play 2 roles. He is the representative of the landlord, and he is the sole interpreter of the Building Act. This is actually 2 persons in one. And if you have 2 persons in one, why on earth you would like to negotiate or to have a public participation? You have a good margin of power. And imagine vice versa, that the city doesn't own the land. If the city doesn't own the land, which is the case of Espoo municipality, for example, they need to go to make informal or agonistic setting of planning. Before planning, we need to contact private owners and start to put an agenda on a win-win deal. No one will take 10 out of 10 points of rewards, but we will make this in agonistic setting. And this is actually what makes Helsinki not only powerful according to the theory, but because they own the land. So that's the dimension that I can talk. What's the difference between the 2 systems?
Do you think part of the problem here is about the black box of planning, that we don't actually understand enough about those things you mentioned, about who owns the land, what are the processes, and so on? So there are, for many people, that it feels like there are very few points of entry into this kind of, let's call it activism in a positive way. And if that is the case, what do we need to do?
Yeah, no, we make kaupunkiopi. So yeah, exactly. It's about I think it's a very humane thing. We all want to be at our best. We all think that it would be nice to engage when we are not total fools. So if we want to have a better interaction with citizens, we should empower the citizens to be at their best. And that requires indeed a real commitment to opening up and basically letting people get more informed. But that is, on the other hand, it's essentially why we are so happy about also lecturing in Aalto University, is to create a discussion around what are the tools that we are actually creating our planning from. We take the case of Puhos, and this we can say because we have really talked with people, the planners there. When they create an idea what that place can be, when we were there having the discussion, we have indeed engaged with this place for years, and we actually lived there also for a while, like kind of nearby. So we are in a place that will be part of we'll say that will be demolished. And the planner there is talking about that there will be a fountain. It's beautiful. We like fountains, but basically we are talking now about a place that the private entrepreneur has invested some serious money. And it's a really, really potential place for that. And when we think about and we backtrack what has been so-called taken into consideration in the planning, have they looked at that clustering? Have they looked at what the cultural value of people who are actually using it? Or is there only, okay, let's look at the architectural value that the museum says, which is also important. But what are the tools that we have, what we use? Basically make those kind of processes in planning. So I think it's a two-way. Yes, we have to or create ways how we become more informed, so that we can create better connections, better conversation, and then on the other hand, I think we also need to really look at what are the parameters that actually the planning is using. what should be there.
Empowerment. Various ways. So is that hand at the back or? We'll go back. Ah,
Thank you.
Right.
So I'm really interested in kind of community-led placemaking. So kind of what you have talked throughout this whole presentation. But what I'm wondering is, what is the real kind of difference why is it so hard in Helsinki for kind of communities to build their own spaces comparing to, I don't know, some other major capitals in Northern Europe? I'm thinking, for example, Berlin or, I don't know, maybe Copenhagen, where there's more space that is given to the citizens. While here, well, one example that comes to mind is the Sukulaki skate park that kind of has been an example of alternative cultures turning into kind of main cultures. So a place that was created by a certain community that has become part of whole Helsinki culture and now is being demolished, even though it has been proven to be a beneficial place for the whole community. So what is the true difference? Is it like regulations in Helsinki? Is it just this like owning of land by the city, or I don't know, what is the factor that makes Helsinki so different?
Yes, thanks for the question. I would say I will start first with this is simply a political will. There is no political will to consider this as a set, as a capital. Planning has different. Actually, there is by Florida there is the learning region concept that cities and regions they create own memory to learn from each other. And Silicon Valley was a learning region concept. It was a result out of this. City of Helsinki doesn't like to learn from other best practices, as you mentioned. They don't need to repeat what's happened in the District 26 in Vienna, what's happened in the neighborhood Rosengård in Malmö, or Copenhagen, just name it. So first thing, political will. And the second issue is that planning in Helsinki is mostly like issuing a building permit. It's mostly about the capitalizing of equity. You need to increase the property value, be it the index of the rental apartments around some site, or even the land itself when you develop it. So more densification means more resources. So the city is playing with one of the resources, which is the ownership of the land. And most of the time, planning is about capitalizing of the equity. So you need to have somehow a balance between. If I can give an example, for example, of the public park. Public park before being a public good or a value, they were doing in a very spontaneous way. But when the city started to consider public park and leisure place spaces as a value, they start to allocate money in them and they became valuable. They became something that you can call, where is the public park on this master plan? But no one will talk about, can we allow and can we enable placemaking somewhere? I think no, because it's not yet a value.
I will very shortly comment on that. I think, is there anybody from City of Helsinki who can answer that? I think one of the things is that definitely it's a narrative. So just as a detail, we mentioned in the conversation in Puhos, like why is Puhos not seen as Mario 1 entrepreneurial hub? So it's also very much about the naming and the perception of indeed how we assign value and this doesn't mean indeed that we should now say nothing should change in these places and we have to this and that. This is not what we are pro. We are all the time talking from the angle are certain questions asked and are certain tools in hands when we are looking at certain places which are live places which are really by people. And that this is the actual factor of cities, the people who are taking spaces and doing something with them. This is the main power of the city, not the plan, but actually people taking initiative.
there's a question over here first, yes.
Hi, thank you. My name is Luba Tiainen. I am a service design certificate, and I'm making my thesis now for the city of Espoo for urban planning office. My newfound point of view from here is that urban planning is actually super political. And the facts that I found maybe in my close circle is that we don't know about it, or we don't understand it, that we actually need to elect people into the like city planning and come to the board or committee, who then like if nature values are important for us and might select the greens or But my question actually is, how do you see, how can we engage people like me, maybe born in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, to actually engage, because the urban planning now is something like for the young people for the future. So now what we are seeing is people who are retired, they are coming to the events. I mean, they have a totally different outlook on the future, and when those builds are done, how many of them are alive? Like, how can we engage? And also those who are then maybe maybe not the majority. So how can we engage also people from maybe minorities?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, no, I like, it's, I would say that there is, when there is this participatory budgeting started in Helsinki, and there was a lot of discussion around it, like what it should have this, and all of this process should have that and that and that. And we were also participating in that conversation, and of course there are those critical views, but the main thing is that this is not the solution. There is none. And when we start with the complexity of the city, it means always that we have to have multiple. We have to do a bit more. So considering whatever group, yes, it's very much. So yeah, so that we like the idea that, okay, well, how do we attract those people there? Yeah, but sure, we can create certain environments that we also experimented with Lähivest, with these stories, because you have other reasons to come there. So we had, for example, a funny situation also with a lot of young people. They were queuing to get to this Safka restaurant because it's €5, quite good food. So, and on the way, there was the city planning department with their maps. And basically everybody engaged. And the city planning department was first a bit like, yeah, we have to put our things, a bit here because in the way, basically blocking the way to the restaurant. But this was basically an interface of creating multiple reasons to engage with something and to understand these things. We don't ever, for example, with the migrant community, it's a very strange thing that we might have to sometimes go for a cup of tea, right? Yes. Yeah. And it's a very funny thing because, we also, when we talk with people from, for example, the city architect of Malmö that we hope we can invite next autumn here, like, he's one of his main sentences in presentations. It's not difficult to reach out to people. They are there. If you start from that, they are there. Just look where they are and just, think what is the way of engaging. We are creating incredible streamlined processes that feed indeed the planning structure. There, the answers come in the right format, and we are even on Teams because it's even more handy. And we can record it. I don't know, we can use AI together, but it doesn't replace the fact that you sometimes have to drink some tea.
I can quickly reflect about engaging young generations. We are doing our best as faculty members because our customers are the students and they are young all the time. They are being replaced, and for this reason we don't feel aging because all the time the customer is the same. So but we have a promise inside us. We have this kind of that we all the time we believe that transformative actions are needed for any industry to improve. So we are teaching the new planners, the potential architects, landscape architects, just name it, that they need to have values, and we don't like this kind of colorful sheet from the United Nations about sustainability because it's not telling you anything. So you need somehow to challenge this kind of standardized cliches. Well, if we are talking about planning body, how they involve, I doubt. Well, you or somebody can answer this. I cannot answer on their behalf why planners are not involved with. But by the way, I have a couple of complaints from Contour and Coast that when they have been approached by somebody from the city of Helsinki, it was people talking about the drug problem. So this is very, very sensitive issue. If you are the city and you have the authority, don't go and put big poster that the event today about drug problems, and you see a couple of patrols of police standing. What you are doing now, you are coloring this place as this is the potential place of drug dealing or drug use. It's terrible. And in Yle, the national channel of TV, one of the journalists called me for an interview, asking that, can I have an interview with you? I said, of course, yes. She told, but because one planner told me that there is a type of architecture that can solve the drug problem in Contour. I told her, actually, I have a good and long experience in architecture. There is no architecture can solve drug problems. Drug problem is a societal issue about people losing their homes. It's not about architecture. The reason is not putting down the shopping mall. So, yeah. Well,
Thank you. I noticed we're into 90 minutes, so I propose we go into extra time. I think we're under two-all draw at the moment, Notice versus Helsinki City. And can we go to 6 o'clock?
I think we can.
We can go to 6 o'clock. And there's a cluster of hands over here. Tell you what, let's take all the questions at the same time, one after the other, and then see what we can do with them.
and in Zoom, we have it in Zoom.
Okay, so interesting discussion. I'm Kim Myrjala, I'm microbial ecologist, and my dream, I'm just fantastic about this, engaging people and getting something done in Helsinki. But I would like, I'm part of work to bring nature back to the city. And then I'm looking where can I do it, and it's really a mystery for me how city planning is working. But I'm now trying to find places and where we could plant trees or even plant a forest garden. And then in this dream, I think the social aspect is really important. That how can we, in this we can also engage people who live in the area. So it's not that something that the city just doing, but it's the people like we told here, they just come and they can do what they can, whatever they're good at, like that. But it's really this of space is, I think it's really somehow the start. I mean, how can we do anything if we cannot start a pilot, so to say, somewhere? And we're trying to get that in the moment.
That's a very appropriate commentary in the context of the exhibition upstairs as well on the gardens. Some really interesting propositions in that. So let's go with some questions here.
Yeah, hello.
Thank you very much.
My name is Christine. I'm one of the elderly ladies here. So, but still, I represent the city of Helsinki to the foreigners. So, what I'm always asked about is why do these new areas, like for example, Kalasatama or Jätkäsaari or Laajasaari, why do they all look the same? Where is the diversity? These are areas which are so-called laboratories for future city planning. And if I look from the metro down to Kalasatama, I don't see one single tree. Even this roundabout, they put with asphalt. So I'm completely horrified by this. And if we have weather like this, and you walk in Kalasatama, for example, you get depressive. Even if you are a very, very happy person, you can't hinder it. These colors, they are shameful that someone even uses these kind of colors. And the whole area is like this. You don't find one single spot where you can enjoy something, where your eyes think, wow, this is kind of what cheers me up. No, it puts you down. All these areas, no green, only gray, all the same architecture, as if no one knows how really to plan a building which looks different to the neighboring building. And the only thing you see there, they cut down the forest and build more of this horrible building. Even the flats are wonderful from inside. I don't want to doubt this. So when I came here, I actually hoped for some kind of explanation and light of hope in the horizon that this will change, that there will be actually diversity in the buildings.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, my question is a bit more on the lines of the political history of Finland as a country, and it comes more from a doubt of understanding. So when you talk about diversity and immigrants, there are different types of immigrants, right? There is immigrants who come from a refugee crisis, there's immigrants who come as educated, skilled laborers, there's immigrants, so there's different types of immigrants that we're talking about as well, right? At the same time, what I'm trying to understand is there a link between this lack of political will that people in planning and people in power have? Is there a link of that with the political history of Finland as a country and the culture of Finns as people, maybe, and the understanding of its history with having, I don't know, I'm trying to look at links of it was never a colonizer in that sense, but of course the history has been where it was colonized by Russia and Sweden. So is there a relation between that and the pride of culture from there to then coming in this day and age where Finland is trying to be a cosmopolitan country now, Helsinki is trying to be a cosmopolitan country. So is it ready to be a cosmopolitan country is my question. Or is it trying to be something which it's not is another question. So it's a slightly complex question, but I don't know if you're getting my point.
Questions.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's a question at the back.
Can I-
and then I can get them to respond.
Yeah, can I take a question from
Yeah, okay.
online audience?
Online question. Online.
So some of the factors that do not allow the process to make master plans to be modernized come from the old and too ethereal national land use law in Finland. In fact, it leaves out aspects such as segregation or stronger tools for the recovery of capital gains due to increases in land value due to government decisions or the management of free land for urban projects. Practically, the plans are made to regulate private construction, but without tools for directing transformative urban actions. What options do you see that can modify this way of doing and intervening in cities?
Are we ready for that final question from the back? And then we'll try and get you to answer some of those.
Final questions? I'll take it there and then there was a.
All right.
I
This is,
promise. Sorry.
Thank you for the policy. Yeah.
Last final.
Right. Hi, my name is Juhana. I represent Palise Suvilahti skate park and also this city movement called citizen movement called Kaiken Helsinki. And to answer like a few questions over there, like the guy asking about the skate park thing, and I think one speculation is due, like as someone just said, about the historical context. Like we've been like under many centuries, we've been under different commanding rules. So maybe like the city officials don't kind of like understand. They don't trust its citizens, which is like a great shame. There's like a great activity over here in Helsinki, and has always been like throughout the past decades, all this kind of like grassroots movements, and continuing furthermore, going to be very quick. But this Kaiken Helsinki is a movement we've been conducting probably very few of you guys. I don't know, was something there already, and we are trying to, at the moment, we are trying to gather all this kind of lähiruokaliikkeet and all this kind of like independent, there are great concerns because of the yleiskaava, that kind of like trying to form a consortium of like these concerns like movements, trying to combine our strengths. So as kind of like as not being dictated by the Helsinki anymore, like what is being kind of like planned out, that we are being heard out and taken into consideration and having more kind of like dialogue in the future. So if any of you guys are interested, just like email us at Kaikkien Helsinki altogether, kaikkienhelsinki@gmail.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Maybe I will try to keep it quick. I'm a student of architecture from Aalto University, and I'm not representing a city of Helsinki, but I did do an internship at the Asemakaavoitus in Eastern Helsinki, where actually also you are quite about potato, and all of the studies you've done is not necessarily taken with open arms into the faculty.
No.
But just wanted to raise this issue that the homogenization of thought and maybe a version that we've been talking about here is really well represented in the zoning list. So when we are talking about this type of cultural diversity, many of these issues, I found it quite interesting in the city that most of the people I worked with, they truly did think that they're doing the best for the city. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Okay, a barrage of different questions. One about the history and how history has sort of shaped certain attitudes to the planning in Finland. Question we just heard about representation. Is there real representation? Question about engagement, and obviously this question about difference as well. Why is Jätkäsaari so boring? And the question of the green city as well, and what we do about that. So any of those themes.
I will take a quick.
Pick a card.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will take a quick round of them.
Yeah.
First about the nature and the city. We as we are talking about that human are not involved in participation, non-human also are ignored. Flying squirrels in the northern part of Munkkuvori was planned on the Yleiskaava 2016 on the top of the flying squirrel area. And they took 1 year to have an annex to remove this. Because why? Because they don't involve that the one telling that you're doing a crime according to the endangered species and agreement with the EU, you cannot build on the top of the place of flying squirrels. So if the human are ignored, of course, non-human are ignored in involvement in the planning decision. The history. I would say that all the time we receive that Finland is homogenized nation, or they are homogeneous nation. They are not. This is fabricated because there is a need for creating a national identity. And if this is fabricated, I would say it's totally fine to have people from Savo, to have Karjalainen, to have Sami, to have different people, have people with brown eyes, with green eyes. I would say that this is something that maybe history could be reflected more from a native, but I think that this is not real. But we are under this kind of rigidity that let's make a national identity. And about the hot potato. So you maybe you talked about that many people in the planning body, they believe that they are doing the best. And I would say that many of them carry very good values. The problem is that an institution is collective. There is a system. So I met many people who extended this idea. They like diversity. A planner said, I live in Kontula, I like it. He's a planner. Okay. But they are individuals, but the system is collective. It's a machine, it's a factory. And actually, the machine is producing what is satisfying the system. The system is stronger than the individual part of the system. So that's somehow, if you met somebody that you believe that he or she is very good, they are good, they are very good. But they are working in a system. What is allowed, and what is not, which is what I talked about, this kind of smoke pumps.
There was a lot of cars in the, maybe I merge a little bit, I had the pleasure this year actually to write about Finnish history to a very quite widely read weekly called Apple magazine. And so from the 30s to look at the everyday history. So in a certain way, I'm thinking of the pressure that I should be able to answer your question about it. But I think that even though the understanding of the layers of history is really crucial, I think this is a certain kind of narrative pattern that can distort and misguide us from a more productive, let's say, path. I think it's very important to understand that this idea what we had in the little bubbles of basically the ideal-driven or certain kind of best ideas approach versus the more ideas where you start from the existing actually connection has to do with there is sometimes you say that Suomi or Finland as a company, we approach cities as like that. There's my partner would give a very good crystallized idea about this. So there is a certain kind of efficiency and a certain kind of how things have worked, and it has a certain directions like companies. And this is in a certain way, because now I'm turning almost a little bit against my friend here in the sense of like the solution is not just of, let's say, go in the system and break it open. It is actually to embrace market in a different way.
So what did you say?
To embrace market in a different way. What we have now, and why this is such a damaging process for this happening, when we are creating basically an idea of cities where, because the city needs investments, we can be, honest about it. It's a metabolism. It has to happen somewhere, there are always contested places. But if the only direction is that we need a certain kind of capital, which is at the moment disconnected from local economy, which is what has happened very much with we are a global city and we don't want to close borders, etc., etc. So this is just this is what we live with. But at the same time, we should nourish and be specifically careful about that we create more local alternatives on the market. And we create, and this is the most dangerous thing that you can say to things, we create more demanding consumers. We have to ourselves as citizens start to relate to our city like that. Not through certain just pushing agendas, but we have to start to relate that we are actually creating all together a market of ideas, a market of interaction, a market of looking together for different solutions. And I would say that this is the biggest, maybe historical problem, that we have a young urban culture that has, even though cities have also here been built around trade, we have had an economy that has been very much about certain natural resources and pushing them through a certain industry and creating through that interaction, and less even in Sweden, where you have much more old cities which have been created very much through trade and interaction between people. And you just see the lack of diversity that comes from that. So I don't know if we're going to be more cosmopolitan, and if we, but I don't think there is any other option than to basically look for where the life is and life is in people. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. We'll finish with those words, and life is in people. Wonderful. Thank you. Katja, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just want to say thank you, Guy, Hossam, and Katja for joining, and the audience, both online and in person, for staying up until this time. And I suggest, although we said that we go to Badger, maybe everybody is a little bit too tired, and we have this opportunity here of an open museum. So let's maybe mingle here a little bit and then, you know, everybody goes home. But thank you all and thank you three for, you know, for joining us. Thank you so much.